Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Kimberly Cloud Show. I'm your host, Kimberly Cloud. Today, I have a very, very special guest for the show today. Can you go ahead and announce to the world who you are and where you're calling from?
Yeah, I'm Kurt Ellenberger, and I am in beautiful West Michigan, where we just warming up after getting close to 3 feet of snow in the last 6 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That sounds like a headache,
it
So
it is.
can you tell me about your past leading up into your present, what you would do, what you've done?
Sure. I'm originally from Canada, so I'm first generation. My parents were, and my grandparents were immigrants after World War II, so they had to leave over there. Came to Canada, and so that's where I was born. I'm from Windsor, Ontario, which is about a quarter of a mile from Detroit, Michigan. So as a musician, that's really where I cut my teeth was in the Detroit music scene, the jazz scene, theater, and other areas. So I'm primarily a musician for most of my life, and then I also am a composer and an author. Um, and I got into music pretty young. I kind of got hooked by it when I was a teenager and really started practicing like crazy, 3 4 hours a day. And by the time I was in my late teens, I was working professionally in all over the United States. So that's a little bit about my journey there. I kept working as a musician until my late 20s, and at that point, I just didn't see myself doing that for the rest of my life. And so I thought I'm going to go back to school, and that's what I did. I got a master's degree and a doctoral degree, and I got a job at a university, first in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and then in Lethbridge, Alberta, so just north of Montana. And then I got a job here in West Michigan in 1999 at Grand Valley State University, where I've been for 26 years, and I just retired a couple months ago.
Congratulations to everything. Can you tell me what has music and how have music been a part of your life and what did it mean to you? And if you ever fell out in love with the music that you used to play.
Yeah, I think part of, first of all, for me, music was such a big part of the family. My dad is an avid singer, and he's always involved in choirs, the church choir. There was a choir at one of the local clubs. And as kids, we just sang. He taught us songs. My sister and I, he'd put us to bed, and we'd lay there and just sing songs till we fell asleep. So music was always a big part, singing as a little kid, and then we had to take lessons, had to learn an instrument, and I wasn't real keen on that when I was 7 years old, having to practice for an hour and a half as a 7 or 8 year old. But later on, as I got introduced to some really cool music as a teenager, I remember it quite well. I heard Duke Ellington with his big band, and I heard Gustav Holst, who's a classical composer, and I was just mesmerized by their music. And after that, I was hooked. That's when I started practicing a lot, taking lessons with a lot of the great musicians in Detroit. And that was my path. I just knew that that's what I wanted to do. Um, as a jazz musician, the opportunities to play what you want to play are not quite as numerous as we might like to be. So, like most jazz musicians, you kind of piece together a living by playing weddings and parties and restaurants and hotels and bars and that kind of thing. And while that that can be fulfilling, after about 10, 12 years of that, I kind of had enough. I just didn't see it as a viable thing for me to do as I got into my 30s or 40s. So that's when I went back to school. So yeah, there was a time when I kind of got tired of playing other people's music, and I saw going into higher ed as a way of having the autonomy to be able to make the music that I wanted to make, both as a jazz musician and as a composer.
Everything you say is very well said. You felt like, you fell out of love or whatever happened, you didn't want to pursue it no more. Um, do you still sing? on the side or do anything as a hobby?
Not too much. I mean, I still compose. And
Mm.
I have a little keyboard down here that I just
I heard
improvise
it.
on and
Can you
have
play a
fun with.
sound? Can you play a sound? Can you please? I heard you play. It sounds very
Yeah, so
well
there you
played.
go. So I kind of mess around a little bit still, but I have a hand condition that kind of prevented me from playing. So I had to retire about 16 years ago, I think it was 18, 17, 18, something like that. And then I got into, so I couldn't play anymore. I could still compose, of course. Um, and I was commissioned by the Grand Rapids Symphony to arrange Vivaldi's Four Seasons for jazz quartet, orchestra, and ballet. And my hand condition was already getting kind of bad, and I thought this is a good big gig for me to call it a career on in terms of being a player, which was really difficult because that's what I'd done my whole life. But it was also another door opened up for me. I started a blog, and so I wrote this article about it was an article about kind of the life of a jazz musician, and it got picked up within a month by the Minneapolis Star or whatever the big newspaper is
Get
there.
out of here.
Yeah, so people were quoting it, and I thought, wait a minute, maybe I'm onto something here. So I kept writing in the blog, and then I entered a Carnegie Hall Arts Blogger contest. So I was in that and made it to I think the semifinals, and then they kicked out all the professional writers, and that was that was kind of the end of that. But because I did that, Huffington Post saw my blogs for that contest, and I got a phone call from them, and they said, "Hey, we want to publish all your blog stuff." So I published with them for about 7 or 8 years. They published everything that I wrote. And then, that relationship kind of changed a little bit. And then I started writing for All About Jazz, which is the oldest and biggest internet jazz resource out there. So that a little bit of a journey there, coming from being a player and then kind of stumbling into this thing of being a writer, which I really had never thought I would do, but it just kind of happened organically, and all of a sudden I'm writing all these articles, so it's kind of fun.
Yeah, and that's like your heart. And tell me about your journey with your masters and doctorates and which one like was the masters more important to you because it was more vigorous? Was the doctorates or were they both? How did you see advancing graduate school into like a doctorate's program?
Well, I think they were both really important, probably for different reasons. I mean, I'd been out of school, out of my undergrad for 7 years, 6 years, so I hadn't been in school at all. And I think the master's program, which I did at University of Northern Colorado in Greeley, just north of Denver, I think that was a really good kind of transition back into school because it's a fairly small place. So you got a lot of personal contact with really great professors, and so that allowed me to kind of get back on the academic treadmill, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't say treadmill, conveyor belt maybe. So that was a really good prep for me. And then I moved to Austin, Texas, where I did my doctorate, and that's a much bigger school than Greeley was. But I loved it because again, just world class professors, and I could kind of carve out my own program within the doctoral degree, so I could focus on a lot of the things that I was interested in, which was great. Um, and Austin is such a great city. I was able to work like crazy. So I was making pretty good money while going to school full time. Although I was probably pretty groggy for some of the 8 a.m. classes when I was working till two a.m. on Sixth Street.
Wow, that is amazing. You sat up there and you were working full time and going to doctorate classes, Where was it? What was your challenges throughout school with work and home life or beyond that?
Well, I was single till I finished my doctorate. So, so I didn't have a lot of responsibilities on the home front. There was no wife, there were no kids or anything like that. So that made it fairly easy. Um, I think the challenge for me was that I could work a lot, and because Austin is such a music town, there are just so many gigs. And for me, a part of that challenge was, boy, how much time can I devote to that to make money, and how much time do I need to devote to school? And it eventually, after a couple of years, especially towards the end, I just had to really pare down the gigs to focus on school to finish up that doctorate. But it was so great because again, there was so much work. It was mostly weekend work, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I still had lots of time to do my schoolwork. But it did become a challenge at the end. At the end of a doctoral program, you're preparing for the comprehensive exams, and so those are I forget if it's 2 or 3 days of, you're in an exam room for 4 to 6 hours, and you have to know a lot about every different topic in your discipline, as well as your own personal area that you're specializing in. So getting towards that was a push that I just had to cut everything else out, or pretty much most everything else out, to focus on studying.
If you had to give my audience a key piece of advice of why they should go for a doctorate's, master's, bachelor's, or even associate's or technical school degree, what would you tell them?
I would say if you're the kind of person that enjoys the challenge of learning new things, or is curious about those things, then I would say definitely do that, because you get those challenges in graduate school. They push you into places that you haven't been, and maybe places that you don't want to go, but that rounds you out in a different way and makes you a more broadly educated person than maybe sticking just, in this lane. So I think it's a great experience if you have that kind of attitude. If you really want, if you're curious, you want to learn new things, and maybe you want to say, I want to increase my certification so that I can move up the ranks in whatever career I'm in. That's a great move too. But I'm just someone that loves reading, loves learning, and so for me, it was just a wonderful fit. It was hard work, but it wasn't anything that I didn't like doing. I really enjoyed the challenges. And again, being surrounded by really smart peers and fantastic professors, it just raises your level to be around good people who are working hard towards similar goals.
Well said, like being around people that are engaging. Like I talk to my professor once a week. I'm working on my second master's, and he basically he told me, he said, to get a master's, let alone a second master's, it's not as easy as people think, and I took one doctorate's course. I got an A in it, but I see that was like the second like class into the first class. So I was like, so I feel what you're going, like I feel the same way you feel about school, about college. And how do you like where are you trying to go like for your future with journal being like putting things in a journal paper and it being like out there for the whole world to see, or just maybe your city or state? Either way, where do you see yourself going for like the future with that?
Well, in terms of the writing, I'm going to try and keep doing what I've been doing. So I really enjoy bringing kind of high level disciplinary topics to people who are not in the discipline, and try and making it understandable. That's kind of what I did as a teacher, and I really get a kick out of that. So I've written articles on, music and evolution and how that works. I've written articles on music acoustics, like why is a minor chord feel sad to us, stuff like that, or even kooky stuff like why is Christmas music sound so jazzy, which is a question that students asked me for years and years, and I would give them an answer, and all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, I can write an article about that. I think other people will be interested in what the relationship is between Christmas music and jazz. So I'm going to keep doing that. I think I've got somewhere around like 40 articles out there already. So I'm finding that yeah, thanks. I'm finding that it's harder to find those topics, but every time I've thought, oh, I don't think I'm going to find another topic, all of a sudden something shows up, and next thing you know, I'm digging in and doing the research and working on a new article. So I'm hoping that'll continue. But I also I'm the managing editor of the International Association of Schools of Jazz, their journal, and they're in Amsterdam. So that's something that I enjoy doing, and I'm also a contributing editor at All About Jazz. So that keeps me kind of busy doing, well, kind of school related stuff. I'm editing articles. I just finished one at All About Jazz about Tony Bennett and actually Tony Bennett and the Mafia. So it was really interesting, even as an editor, for myself to read that, which keeps me current, keeps me kind of interested. So I'm doing a lot of stuff like that, and I plan on continuing that as long as I can.
Tell me about music, your article, Music Evolution and Satin Keys, keys that sound sad. Tell me what you found out and why people should listen and read, well, read and interpret.
Well, it's interesting because everybody listens to music, and everybody has a real emotional response to it, right? I mean, I'm sure you do. You listen to some music and it makes you want to cry, or it makes you sad, or it makes you happy, or it makes you want to dance. Um, but I was looking into how does that actually work, and it's really quite a fascinating phenomenon how our brain reacts or how our brain processes the sound we're hearing. So to just give a short explanation, if I play two C's, here's a C, and here's another one, and here's another one. So we call those notes C, but they're all different notes. Why do they have the same name? Well, because we hear them as being kind of higher versions of each other, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So, but that's a weird phenomenon. What does that actually mean? Well, the reason we hear them as being higher versions of each other is because they are a factor of two to each other. So the first C, let's say the string length to make that note is 2 feet. If the second C, you need 1 foot. The third C, you need half a foot. So the ratio of the string lengths and the waveforms is 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. So it keeps on going, right? So that's why we hear it, because it divides the string. Each one divides the string before it in half, and that makes a symmetrical relationship. And our ear recognizes the symmetry. Our ear says, "Oh, that's symmetrical. There's nothing complex there," right? So if I asked you, for example, could you fold a piece of paper in half?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's easy to do because your brain works on the principle of two, right? Sorry, I got to get my thing back here. Um, so if I asked you to fold it in four, you could do that too. But if
Yes.
I asked you to fold it in 11,
Oh, how would you do
ooh,
that?
yeah, you wouldn't be able to do that. So that series, that number series, 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, is called the binary series. And so it shows up in music because we hear the symmetry of the notes if they are in the 2 to 4 or 4 to 8 relationship. And we call that an octave. Now, that number series is also what's powering the computers we're working on. So the binary series is the root foundation of how computers do their computing. It's also at the beginning of our lives. So when we have a sperm meeting an egg, well, now the sperm is inside the egg, but then it splits into two, and then those two split into four, and then those four split into eight, and we have the same binary series happening there. So we find it as the basis for computer life, I guess, if we want to call it. We find it as the basis for human life in some way, or all life. And we find it in music, which is really strange. So here's the crazy part. Your ear also hears that there is or when the relationship between the waves is complex and asymmetrical. So I'll play you something. Can you sing, Kimberly?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to play you something, then I'm going to ask you to sing what note you think should come next. Ready? There you go. You nailed it. You nailed it. So
Yeah, I know
here's
it.
the weird part. I didn't play that note.
Yeah, I
So
anticipated it.
yeah, so how did you so think about what happened. Sound waves came into your ear. They were converted to an electrical digital signal or electrical signal by your ear, sent to your brain. Your brain somehow processed them and realized that there was a complex waveform, and it supplied the nearest simple solution, which is the note you sang. So it sent that information to your vocal cords and said, this is a complex waveform, but there's a simple solution right here, and it's a multiple of 2. And that's what you sang. So that's a really weird thing when you think about it, right? Your brain is processing the sound, analyzing it in terms of the symmetry between the waves, and then it has this unique skill where it supplies the solution to the nearest solution. So if I play this, what you're hearing is 11, 9, 10.
That's pretty cool. That's
So
really
so
cool.
so the 11 and the 9 are complex, right? They don't split the string or the string length evenly like the 2s and the 4s and the 8s do. So your brain says, that 9 is complex, that 11 is complex. Can we just move that down to a 10? Your brain wants to hear the 10 because it's a multiple of 2. Does that make sense?
Are we already embodied with music, or do our brain just analyze it to predict what is going to happen next with music?
Well, we certainly get better at it by listening to it, by singing it. But what that skill that you just demonstrated is built in. It's not a cultural thing where you say, "Well, I learned to do that." There's nowhere I could play that where someone would sing some weird note and think that's the solution. So it's kind of built into our hardware and our software, which is weird because that's what I looked at from an evolutionary standpoint is why do we have that? Like being able to predict the next pitch does not as far as I can see wouldn't give you any more opportunities for procreation or for resource allocation. So why do we have that? It's a weird skill, and I scoured the evolutionary literature and I just could not find an answer that made much sense.
Based on your knowledge, how can the mind be hijacked from negative music, and how can we overcome it by whether we listen to it or not? How can we prepare for whatever is to come when negative music impact and can impact our lives?
Well, that's a great question. You're asking a question that's been asked and acted on since the Greeks and probably before. So the early Greeks recognized the power of music to change behaviors. And they were concerned about it because they didn't want their young people, quote unquote, corrupted by bad music. And that concern, we find that kind of throughout history, right? Some of the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century didn't like jazz. Why? Because it in its DNA it had the sound of freedom in it, and they knew that. So I think in our day and age, we really don't pay much attention to that, but I think we should because music, we mimic what we hear in music. So we mimic the sounds, we mimic the gestures, we mimic the attitudes. So when we listen to something for a long period of time, it can either lift us or it can also bring us down. And so I think people should be more careful with music than we are because of that mimetic quality. So if you go to a funeral, for example, the music is going to be slow, kind of quiet, sad, maybe a lot of minor key stuff, no big rhythmic gestures or anything like that. So you walk into that room and you hear that music and you start to mimic it. You know instinctively, well, this is a place where I should not be loud. I should not be, I need to be respectful. I need to be quiet. I need to take things slowly. I'm not going to be boisterous or make any quick moves or anything like that. Um, and it's the other way around too. When you go to a party on a Friday night, the music is boom, 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 right? And then you feel like, oh, okay, that it's rhythmic, it's vigorous, right? It's beating at 120 beats per minute, which is roughly double the human heart rate. So it excites you, and that makes you more amenable to a party, makes you more talkative, makes you more relaxed, etc. So I think we really discount the fact that we mimic the gestures, the rhythms, and the attitudes that are found in the music we listen to. So be careful, because if that music is negative, if it's ugly, if it's if it's well, yeah, if it's negative and ugly, you're bringing that negativity into your life, and it's going to be a bigger part of you. So I think, we discount that in the modern era. We just think, oh, it's just music, so I can do whatever I want. But we we ingest it.
Last question. How do we prepare if we have to, like, because for instance, based on the areas, the environment, or wherever the culture, wherever you're born at, radio stations are more susceptible to play a certain type of music. So growing up, people, I've seen it, people that has been rap and R&B, not to say all of rap or all of R&B is bad, but it comes to a point where you say enough is enough, stop
Mhm.
degrading me because it's going to make me degrade me, and so how can we prepare?
Boy, I saw that happening a lot as a teacher. I'd be, walking around campus, and these are all really great students, and I'd hear some of this misogynist, profane rap music coming out of the cars, and I thought, how does this blend with a nice young liberal college student who's enlightened and open-minded, and then you're listening to some of this music that really has a negative message in it. So how do you prepare for that? I think you just have to be aware of it and try to avoid it. But how do you avoid it for your kids, right? Your kids are listening to stuff, and you don't have that much control over it. And there's really not much you can do. It's just out there in the culture. And I think the best thing we can do is offer a viable alternative to it and say, what about this music? This is really great music. So, for example, Motown, or a lot of the '70s music, or classic rock, or blues, or there's all that great music out there, and it's got a positive message to it. So let's access that and try to stay away from the stuff that's going to bring us down.
Well said. And how do you have anything you would like to say? And if not, how can the people reach you? And that's how I end.
Well, I just like to say thanks for having me. This has been
You're
really
welcome.
fun. It's just great to kind of branch out into other topics. So thanks a lot for having me.
You're welcome.
My personal website is just myname.com. So it's kurtellenberger.com. There you can find my recordings, you can find my compositions, and links to my articles as well.
Well said. Stay on the line. Thank you guys for joining my show today. Take care, be safe, and I will see you guys later. Bye.